welcome back, everyone, to the Heart Set Above podcast. We are your hosts, Ellen and Georgia. We're here to talk about forgiveness. Isn't this like the best topic ever? Do you think people, when they see this, are going to be like, scroll? No, thank you.
Yeah, skip.
Yeah, skip that one. Don't want to talk about forgiveness. What comes up for you, Georgia, if someone were to say, like, in today's D group or in today's sermon, we're going to talk about forgiveness. Like, what happens to you viscerally in your body?
What a good question. I feel like I get like 10 million arrows over my body, over my face. I mean, going like, you need to forgive. You need to forgive.
Oh, you feel accused.
I feel attacked. I feel like, I feel like it becomes an indirect direct. Do you know what I mean? Like it feels personal. What about you?
Yeah. Like, oh, there's so many things you need to forgive. Like those are the arrows, all the people or all the things you need to forgive.
Yeah. And like or almost like this like interrogation of myself of like, oh my gosh, is there something I haven't forgiven and something I need to, you know,
right.
Like it becomes
those
like
arrows.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're going to shear
Attack.
you apart and figure out, what is in there that we need to unearth. Yeah, for me, it's dread, just pure dread, like this internal groan of dread, like, ugh. If someone were to say, like, if my preacher got up there on Sunday morning and said, in my sermon today, I'm going to talk about forgiveness, I would just have this, like, groan that I would have to stifle from coming out. Because I would feel like I already know exactly what you're going to say. I've heard this sermon a million times, right? I grew up in church. I've heard this. I've heard it. I know I could do it for you, right? Like, we must forgive. You're forgiven to the extent that you forgive. 70 times. Seven times.
70 times 7 times? 70, 77.
Yeah, something just like that. You know what we're talking about. The 7 to the 7th power or whatever. Forgive that many times. Who are you to judge? Who are you to hold on to anger? Because Jesus has forgiven you. Look at him on the cross. What you've done to him. How dare you? Right? Like that is the sermon that I heard multiple times growing up. And if someone got up there, I would just groan internally like, ugh, I don't want to hear this again. Because I don't think it's very helpful. I don't know about you, but hearing that sermon over and over and over in my childhood, in my Christian journey, you know, like my own personal walk with God, has not helped me forgive effectively. Has it helped you? Like, do you feel like that has worked?
If anything, it makes me more resistant. Like it feels like it only like makes my walls go up. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like I'm less inclined to hear that from like the pedestal or the, you know, the preacher's seat.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It makes me feel less seen. Like I don't matter. It only matters what I do, and what I must do is let it go without even feeling, without even caring about it, which makes me feel unjustified, invalidated, unseen. And I think that's where that's where those arrows come from for you. Like, it's something you're not doing right. That's where that groan comes from for me, right? Like I have to just suppress the reality, the pain that I feel in order to sweep it under the rug, pretend it's not there. And I don't know about you, but every time I've heard forgiveness addressed like from the pulpit, it's always been in this very negative way. Like you are obviously not doing this right. Like those arrows basically, right? Like those arrows of like, you are always failing at this. You always need to be better at this. You have people you need to forgive right here, right now. You are always behind the 8 ball on this.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's always feels like there's something more you could be doing in order to be better at forgiveness. I always think about like, I feel like there's like this line in my head of like, if you still even remember the wrong that's been done to you, you haven't forgiven. Like this checklist of like, if you are doing this, you haven't forgiven. If you are doing this, you haven't forgiven. And like, it feels like so much scrutiny. And then you inevitably find yourself in one of those checkboxes of like, oh, I haven't done that, so I guess I haven't forgiven because this person's telling me I haven't forgiven. Like it feels like there's this criteria that can feel impossible to me. For me, it's always that one about like forgive and forget. If you haven't forgotten, if you still remember it, like, or if it still pops up from time to time, you must have not forgiven yet. And I'm always like, oh, I'm done by that one.
Yes, I know. I was just thinking when you were saying that, like, forgiveness equals failure. That's what I think of when someone
So
brings up
true.
forgiveness. Like, I'm a failure at that. Even you're going to bring it up. I already know I'm a failure. That's what those arrows are, right? That accusation. You're a failure. And you're right. That sense of failure, I think, comes from all these distortions, these lies that we believed as truth that we heard growing up that just were not based in biblical fact, though they were preached to us in biblical terms, right? From someone positing to exegete it from the Bible, but it wasn't really biblical, I don't think. We're going to at least make that case today to our listeners, right? So I love what you said. Let's talk about some of those distortions that we walked away from childhood with. You said a great one. If you even remember, you have failed. You have not forgiven, right? And I heard that all the time. If you're keeping a record of wrong, how dare you?
Right.
God doesn't keep a record of your wrongs. He got on the cross for you, right? So if you even remember, I mean, and I think we can even take that further and say, if you remember it's failure at forgiveness, certainly if you still feel angry or hurt about it, oh, forget it. You have doubly failed, right?
Yeah.
That is a big distortion. Any others you can think of, distortions that came from growing up in church?
I think another one is that like it should be done with immediacy. Like it's an instant thing. Like this sense of like forgiveness is something you decide in a moment and it's quick and you do it, and it's like it's very much, I feel like it comes from this perspective of like repentance being this 180, right? Which I don't think is wrong or like completely wrong, but it's like it does like kind of give you this impression of like it's meant to be this like very sudden quick turnaround, and like I feel like that was always the thing with forgiveness. Like it's like you do it as soon as you can. There's like the sense of rush with it, like the sooner the better sort of thing.
Yes, I wrote that down in my notes too. It's a light switch,
Yeah.
right? That was the distortion from childhood that I always remember, or even from adulthood, in the Christian life. If you don't forgive right away, if it's not a light switch moment for you, I don't forgive. And then boom, I do forgive. You failed at it. It is not a journey, right? Like that's the distortion. It's not a journey. It's a in this moment decision, and you can decide to forgive or not. It really takes away that journey process.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you have any others that come to mind for you? I've got one more, but
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'll tell you one of mine, and we'll see if it matches, because what you just said matched what I had. So, if you remember your failing, certainly if you're angry or hurt over it, you have failed. If it's not a light switch, if it requires any kind of journeying, it's a failure. I would say another one that I have is that you will, I mean, sort of related to what we just said, but if you ever feel it again, like if you ever feel hurt or angry over it in the future, even though you have decided to forgive in that moment, you have failed, right? That forgiveness is a one-time decision and it will last forever. That was a distortion I grew up with.
I hadn't thought of that one, but that is a massive one. Yeah, this idea of like this, it is that idea of like that moment decision lasts a lifetime. It should, like, that's the idea, right? Like it's this should behind it. It should be able to carry you through for the rest of your life. Okay.
Yeah, forever, no matter what.
Right, yeah.
You forgive 20 years earlier, and then 20 years later, when you're reminded of it, you've still forgiven. And if you didn't, then you didn't originally forgive. You failed 20 years ago, and you've been failing every day since. That's
exactly. Those 20 years have not counted at all for anything.
Exactly, not counted.
Yeah.
What's your last one?
Mine, I mean, it might be a little bit controversial, but mine was the myth that forgiveness immediately means reconciliation with the person that you have felt wronged by. Like, I think in church there is such an emphasis on like unity and being unified, which is obviously a good thing. God wants unity, but then I think it can often then lead into teaching about forgiveness, where it's like, okay, with people who wrong you, immediately reconciled. Like that again, it's that immediate sense of like everything has to be fast, everything has to be glued back together as soon as possible, and that includes like your relationships as soon as possible. Just jump straight back into spending time with them and being in the same room as them and all that kind of stuff. Like I think it's the quick turnaround of that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it bleeds nicely into my last one, which is related, and it is that forgiveness equals no boundaries, right? Like I think we can forgive, we can even have reconciliation, and still have boundaries to protect ourselves because of that hurt or pain, right? I think that's wise to do even most times. But I'm curious when you just said that, like, about forgiveness doesn't automatically mean reconciliation. What does reconciliation mean? Like what I think it made me think about, okay, we would say forgiveness is a journey. I guess what I hear you saying is reconciliation is also a journey. And I think part of that journey is often boundaries and, conveying those boundaries appropriately to protect you and that other person. But yeah, I don't know, like how would you define reconciliation in this context of forgiveness?
That's a good question, and I wish I had a definition in front of me. But from my own like sense of the word, I think it's like a reestablishing of the relationship that had been fractured through the wrongdoing. I think like it's a reconcile to to come back together or to refigure what the relationship looks like in the aftermath of wrongdoing. I think that's my sense of it.
Yeah, I love that.
What would you say?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's so true. I was just thinking like if reconciliation means goodwill or positive regard, then I would hope that forgiveness, the journey of forgiveness, would lead us to that initial part of reconciliation. I have no ill will toward you. Yeah, I have positive regard. I don't harbor any bitterness or anger or anything like that, right? Like I've worked through that. And if it does pop up again, I know how to work through it. I know, how to move through that with God. But you're right. I think reconciliation is a journey, and it does start with that initial touch point of connection. I have no ill will. I hope the best for you. I love you in the Lord, right? I love you as a friend, maybe. But that doesn't mean we necessarily get to re-engage in the exact kind of relationship that we had before. There might be changes, boundaries, and even scars of this wound that may never, this side of heaven, be healed fully such that we can re-engage exactly the way that it was before. So there is a big grief. I mean, hearing you say that, I think that's so true and so wise that if forgiveness is a journey, reconciliation will be a journey too. And because of that, because with forgiveness, there's something lost, your sense of safety, potentially even the safety you felt within this relationship and the exact kind of relationship, the closeness that you guys had once before, there really is, at least in some sense, you will not be able to go back to it exactly after every hurt, And so I think because of that, grief is really at the heart in a lot of ways of forgiveness and of reconciliation.
Absolutely. And I think, I feel like we say this often about grief and how there is the grief of living in a broken world. And like, that's also, I think, plays a part in that, where it's like, firstly, like the being wronged in the first place is a result of a broken world, but then having to live having to reconcile and be in a relationship that has been fractured, that's also the result of a broken world. It's like, ideally this would never have happened in the first place. And, relationships wouldn't need to be, reestablished or reconfigured. But then because we live in a broken world and because, being wronged is a reality, there is that reconfiguring that has to go on. And I think that grief is, it's like, it exists because of the brokenness of the world. Like, I feel like it always comes back to that, doesn't it?
I know. I was just thinking that same thing. Yeah. Like, wow, we always seem to have grief pop up in pretty much every every topic that we discuss, grief and the grief because of the fallenness of our world is always kind of at the heart of it. So yeah, I think that's really interesting, but also makes so much sense that you're right. We were never meant to be hurt by those that we love, that we feel safe with. And that is what's so devastating, what's so difficult about forgiveness is when we feel hurt by someone we previously felt safe with. Of course, that's a result of our broken world. And of course, that is devastating to our psyche, to our spirit and our soul and our brain as well. And certainly to our relationships. And so I love that you just like, even, I don't think that was part of probably in your notes, but bringing that up about reconciliation, I think is so appropriate for people to understand that forgiveness is a journey, but so is reconciliation. And we can absolutely get our hearts to a place where we say, I love you. I harbor no ill will. I strive to see you every day through the eyes of God. That does not mean that we are re-entering into the exact same relationship that we had before this infraction. And because of that, there is tremendous grief.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about some of these distortions, right, we said if you remember the infraction, certainly if you feel anger or hurt over it, you've failed. If it's not a light switch moment, you have failed. If you ever feel hurt or angry ever again, even in the next 20 years, you have failed. If you don't reconcile right away, you have failed. And if you have any kind of boundary or different type of relationship after forgiveness, you have failed. So what would we say as two therapists? What is the distortion in this? What would we say about each of these distortions? That number one, if you remember at all, you have failed.
Oh, okay. If you remember, I'm like, where do we even begin? If you remember at all, you failed.
Is that true?
No.
Do we psychologically, is that true? Is it even possible to not remember?
Well, that's the thing. I'm like, it's not even possible, surely. Like, it's like, I mean, it's not just about the very idea of like memory. Like, it's also about your body, and there's like a somatic memory as well. There's like there's so much that goes into it, where it's like, that like remembrance isn't just like a picture of the wrongdoing in your mind. It's the felt sense of what you remember of it. Like, it goes so much deeper. And so I think it's a no from me.
Yeah, it's a no from me. That's a thumbs down. Not approved by this therapist. I totally agree. I love that you just said that. You're right. First of all, we can't control if our brains remember. We certainly can't control if our bodies remember. And you're right. So many times, at least we see in therapy, that is what remembers. In fact, our body remembers more effectively than our brain oftentimes. I have had clients who every September, right, they start getting migraines, they get really grouchy, and they're saying, what could this possibly be from? And then they remember, oh yeah, 20 years ago this month, something really terrible happened in my life. And I didn't remember in my brain, but my body remembered, and it started to come out somatically. So I love that you brought that up. That's so true. God, our memory, both in our brain and in our bodies, is something that God gave us to help protect us, to be a really great thing for us, to survive, to thrive in this world. So I certainly don't think that by turning that gift off, we honor God in, trying to forget about that piece of pain in our lives or that infraction. What I was thinking is, if someone walked into my office and, said, my husband said this terrible thing or did this terrible thing to me, and we talked that through, and then a week later she came in and said, my husband did this terrible thing or said this terrible thing to me. And every week for 16 weeks, this client said the same thing. And, every time she left my office, she re-engaged in this relationship as if it hadn't happened. My question to her would be, why aren't you remembering the previous times he has done this? Why do you keep putting yourself in this same position, right? It's not a him issue anymore. It's not to say she's to blame for being mistreated, but at some point she has to be the one to say, I'm not going to re-engage in this pattern, in this cycle that we've created here together, right? You can no longer treat me this way. I will no longer put myself in these positions to be treated this way by you. So not remembering is actually pathological at some point, right? Like it's an issue. It's a clinical, mental and emotional health issue if someone repeats the same pattern over and over to their detriment without remembering the consequences of it.
Yeah, it puts them at risk.
Exactly. Yeah. So that memory, like we said, is such a gift. And ignoring that is certainly not a healthy thing. I don't think ruminating on it and being controlled by it, ruled by it, is healthy either. I think that middle ground is that process of forgiveness and then the process of reconciliation. But it is not completely forgetting or completely being ruled by it. What about this distortion that if you're angry or hurt, even at the point of forgiveness, either now or in the next 20 to 50 years, you have failed? What would we say about that?
I think it's what would I say? It's I think, but there's I feel like there's a well, I feel like it is a distortion because I think there's a distinction maybe between like what you feel and what you do or what you decide to do. Like it's like I think you can experience like the fact that you were wronged. Like I don't think that stops, right? Like it's like you were still wronged. Like even if you are able to forgive them, the fact is you were wronged. And so I think anger or upset that exists with that is kind of it's reflective of what has happened. But I don't think it's preventative of like a an action or a decision or like I think forgiveness and anger can coexist essentially. Like I think those things can just like work together. Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably blowing someone's mind right now. I love that you just said that because I'm a big proponent that two seemingly opposing things can be true at the same time, right? You can forgive someone and still feel hurt and angry over what they did to you or how you were treated by them. I know that seems so I feel like someone listening who grew up hearing the same sort of sermon or the same sort of message that we did about forgiveness would be like, this is blasphemy.
Yeah,
how can this be?
I'm getting the image of like repelling magnets. You know, they're like you guys are trying to put repelling magnets together right now, and it's not going to work, but it will.
Yeah.
It
but
does.
It will. We promise it does. Yeah. I love how you said that. Like just acknowledging your hurt or your anger is just acknowledging a fact. You were mistreated. Someone hurt you, you know, or even if they didn't intend to hurt you, intend to mistreat you, you felt mistreated, you felt hurt or angry over this. And by acknowledging that, or rather, let me say, by not acknowledging that, it doesn't do any good. But acknowledging it doesn't mean you have to be ruled by it and thus take away your forgiveness or your ability to forgive. You can forgive, not harbor any ill will, and still acknowledge, I am hurt. And sometimes I still feel angry about what happened, about what you did or how you said this. And yet I'm not ruled by that hurt or that anger, right? Like that's that messy middle. I can acknowledge it. I can even feel it. I can move through that emotion without being ruled by it.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, it's the same of like sadness as well. You know, there's like, I don't know what you think of this, like stereotype or trope, but of like, you either are someone who gets angry or someone who gets sad, like when you've been wronged. I don't think there's much like scientific proof behind it. Right. I think there's a lot of people that probably feel both. But if you are someone who's like, maybe isn't not so much feels like they get angry when they've been wronged, but they feel sad. They feel saddened by like feeling betrayed or feeling like they've lost a person they can trust or feeling like that lack of safety, and they feel the sadness from that. I think the same applies where it's like sadness and forgiveness can coexist, and you can feel those things and do those things at once. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I guess I get that, right? Some people get sad, some people get angry. I think the people who get angry are sad, but anger is the protection mechanism. That's the truth for me. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. I'm a very angry person by nature. It's not true, genuine anger that's coming out. It's sadness that's being protected by anger in that moment. So yeah, I think it's the same thing. You can feel sad, angry, grieved, mistreated, and still choose to forgive, right? So I guess what we're saying, forgiveness is not an emotion. It is a decision to not hold that wrongdoing against that person forever, right? It's not an emotion. I think we didn't say it in the list of distortions, but I think that is a distortion. No one ever said forgiveness is an emotion, but I think I always grew up thinking forgiveness is an emotion that you feel when you no longer feel sad, hurt, or angry over what someone else did for you. And that's just not true. It is not an emotion. It is a decision and an action.
Yeah, I definitely used to think that like an absence of anger or sadness was an indication that I have forgiven. And that's not true.
Not true. Right. And like what we're saying here with this distortion, you can actually feel hurt, angry, sad, and still choose to forgive concurrently. Like all of those things can be true at the same time. I love that.
Absolutely.
It's a light switch decision. What would we say about that? Is that healthy?
No, I think it's I think that the word you used earlier, journey, is so much more appropriate for forgiveness. Like it's I think it's like it's too much pressure on anyone to call it a light switch or to say it's like something that happens in a moment. I think the thing is with forgiveness is that you don't ever want to feel rushed into forgiveness, and you don't want to even rush yourself. And I think that's where a word like journey is so helpful, and where a word like light switch is so unhelpful. And like it's meant to be something that you feel like you can really consider on like a deep level and like on a heart level. I think like I think if we kept that myth as like it's a light switch moment, there's no way people would be able to access like what's going on for them on a deeper level. Like it would all just be very above the surface of like, oh, well, I just got to forgive and I'm just never going to think about it again, I guess. And like it would just keep all of those other myths like working essentially. So I feel like it like that myth like prevents the process of forgiveness. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, like, just to that point, anything that's done quickly in a therapeutic sense, I immediately inherently do not trust.
Absolutely.
Right? Like if someone comes in and says, since I saw you last week, I have fallen madly in love with someone, I would be suspicious right from the get-go. Like, wait a minute, that seems a little fast. If someone came in and said, since I last saw you a week ago, I have completely forgiven, you know, this person who wronged me, I would be really suspicious and hesitant to fully affirm that, right? Like, hey, that's great. Wow, you moved forward in this journey. That is a huge piece of celebration. But to say, like, I'm done, I've washed my hands of it, I'm immediately suspicious of this, right? So, yeah, I think anything, especially as therapists, if you say anything is a light switch, I'm going to be very suspicious. I think what can be quick is the perspective, right? Like, I really think that's probably at the heart of what this sermon I keep referencing that I've heard multiple times throughout my childhood, is we need to have the perspective that we are not immediately better than someone else when we are wronged by them, because we are capable of the same amount of infraction, the same amount of pain, hurting God and others in the same way that we have been hurt. So I think that immediate realization, that absolutely can be a light switch moment where we can say, hey, wait a minute. Not only do I not want to be ruled by this pain, by this hurt and this anger and this sadness, I also don't want to wrongfully have this perspective that I'm inherently better, they're inherently worse, because I feel so hurt by them. That would be being ruled by it, right? So I think that we can be immediately in touch with that perspective, but that doesn't mean we relinquish the pain, the hurt, the anger, the sadness. We're sweeping it under the rug immediately. That part is a process because those do involve emotions. So we need to move through those emotions, but the decision to not be ruled by those emotions can absolutely be immediate. That can be a light switch.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it's like the difference between like the theological truth and then the emotional truth almost, and like those things work really well together. But it's like I think theological truth is sometimes easier to grasp for us, right? Because it's like it simply is that like, oh, if I hold the wrongdoer, if I like hold us on equal standing of like we are both capable of like truly like, you know, hurting someone and hurting God, like that's easier to kind of like conceptualize, I suppose, or like it's easier to grasp. But whereas I feel like emotions, like the emotional landscape does provide a bit more process and time.
Yeah, emotions are never a light switch, but decisions can be, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then finally, that distortion about, you know, reconciliation is immediate, a light switch, and there are no new boundaries, no new changes to the relationship. What would we say about that?
I think that it's, I mean, I suppose it's possible, depends maybe on the level of hurt, but I think it's just not always the case. And I think having it as like a standard in order to indicate forgiveness, I think that's the major thing. Like, yeah, I think it will look different. I think especially if the hurt is like particularly like, you know, a level of betrayal or of trust or something. Like, I think it actually makes sense to sort of maybe rewire the relationship a little bit so that you can protect yourself in that relationship. And as you said, like reconciliation, like there is the goodwill element, and that can like absolutely exist whilst you have more boundaries in that relationship and maybe aren't as close as you were before, or like don't share the same things with them. Like it may just change, but like that doesn't, like they're not sort of all bound up together in like an indication of like you have forgiven if you completely maintain the relationship you had before and like all this kind of stuff. I think it's allowed to look different, because again, it's like the reality is you've been mistreated. Like we're just working with reality.
Right. Well, it's reminding me of what we just said a minute ago about, like a light switch, that the decision to not be ruled by this hurt and anger or sadness in your relationship with this person can be a light switch. That can be immediate. I'm not going to hold this against you. I'm not going to let this rule me. I choose to have
right.
goodwill toward you. I choose to still strive to see you through the eyes of God, not through the lens of my anger and my hurt. But I do think that you're right. I love that you left room for, if this were either a small infraction, especially if it's the first type of small infraction of this kind, right? And also, I want to say like imagined infraction. I don't mean to say that people make up this hurt, but sometimes we misunderstand the heart or the
100%.
intention or even the words of someone else. And we feel hurt by that, even though that's not what that person intended to convey to us, whether through their words or their actions. And so when that kind of forgiveness is necessary or that kind of processing is necessary, it's a little bit different than if there were a true intentional infraction from that other person. But even that, because it involves emotions, is going to be a journey. It's going to take a little bit more time than your decision of, I will not be ruled by this. I will not let our relationship be ruled by this. I will still strive to see you through the eyes of God, not through the eyes of my hurt, anger, or sadness. But it's going to take some time for me to process through these emotions and maybe even discern if there needs to be some changes or some new boundaries, right? Again, if someone came into my therapy office and said, this same situation keeps happening and I'm not changing anything, but it's hurting me every time, I would say, well, that problem might have started with someone else, but now it lies in your lane. Like now that problem lies with you because you're not creating any boundaries. You're not doing anything different. That's not to say you have control over the outcome. You do have some control over how you are treated or how you expect to be treated. And so I do think that we, again, out of a sense of wisdom and discernment and stewardship over our bodies, our hearts, our minds, and our souls, we need to, pray. We need to take that process, that journey of figuring out, do there need to be changes in this relationship or in the way that I approach this type of connection with this person in order to protect my heart, our relationship in the future, et cetera, anything else that's affected by that. I don't think being ruled by that anger and hurt is good or godly, but I also think that sweeping it under the rug and saying, I just need to forgive and forget and never have any boundaries with this person or in this relationship is actually really detrimental and dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you use the word stewardship because I think that's so appropriate. Because I was thinking about like the role of like being in touch with your own agency or your own power. But I think stewardship like captures it perfectly because it is like it's learning how to steward yourself in relationship with others, and especially in relationship with others in the aftermath of being wronged or mistreated. And I think that's something God calls us to, like in our one another relationships, right? Is like learning how to orient ourselves around each other whilst we're navigating a broken world, whilst we're capable of hurting each other. It's learning how to do that and do it wisely.
Yeah, I was thinking about where Jesus said that we need to be innocent and shrewd, right? Like also two seemingly opposing things. How can we be innocent and shrewd at the same time? But it does call to my mind something about stewardship as well, right? Like we need to be innocent, have goodwill toward everyone, expect the best, etc. But also when we've been shown, especially more than once, that this is not a safe place or a safe person or a safe dynamic, it would be unwise to continue in that exact same way, right? So out of that stewardship over our relationship with God, our relationship with that person, over our own hearts in this fallen world, it would be wise, shrewd to say there needs to be some changes in our dynamics, some boundaries in, how we've been approaching relationship up until now, which leads us into our final point, which is just kind of the clinical framework of how to forgive, right? So you and I grew up in a similar Christian church context, and so we have all these distortions around forgiveness. We are certainly not alone. I think I would say every human has distortion around forgiveness, because it's a lot of what we deal with in therapy. And sometimes that forgiveness is toward self, sometimes it's toward God, and sometimes it's toward others, right? And so I have a sheet here that I use in so many of my sessions. And it's literally 6 steps to granting forgiveness. Now, I will just put a little caveat in here that this is specifically for marriage and family therapy, so it's geared toward a couple. But I think we can kind of alter these slightly to fit any state of forgiveness. So I'm going to read them, but really, honestly, when I go through this with my clients, we rarely get past point 1, at least in the first session, because the first point is so powerful. So I'm going to read them 1 through 6, and then maybe we can just talk about the first 1 or 2 points.
Yeah.
Step 1 in steps for granting forgiveness. Number 1, acknowledge your pain and anger. Allow yourself to feel disrespected. So good. Number 2, be specific about your future expectations and limits. There are the boundaries. Number 3, give up your right to get even, but insist on being treated better in the future. Number 4, let go of blame, resentment, and negativity toward your partner. Surrender it. Number 5, communicate your act of forgiveness to your partner. And number 6, work toward reconciliation when safe. So I think all of those are good. Like, we could talk about a full podcast episode on each one of those, but I'm telling you, I rarely get past step 1 with my clients.
Well,
and step
in
1
ours,
is
in ours we didn't.
In ours, we didn't.
We didn't.
What do you remember from that? Let me read again. Step 1, acknowledge your pain and anger. Allow yourself to feel disrespected. What did you think when you first read that?
I was like, I'm allowed to feel disrespected? Like, it was crazy. Like, I was just like never in my life had I felt like I had that permission when I'd been wronged.
Wow.
And it was huge. It was huge because I was like, that's true. Like, I was like, I've been disrespected. Like, I've not been treated the way God wants me to be treated, how he desires to treat me. And that's just disrespect. And to feel that, I think it was very, very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's acknowledging something that is true. And I think in order to acknowledge that, we have to stand in the reality of our worth. And I'm not saying our worth that we've earned or gained according to an earthly context. I'm talking about our worth that we've been freely given through no sense at all. It doesn't make any sense that we've been given this worth, but the worth that we've been given by God, right? He has given us his mark, his name. He said, you are my child. And so I always think about, if I'm the daughter of the one true king, I deserve a measure of respect, not because I'm inherently so great, not because of anything great I have done, but because of who created me, whose mark I bear, whose name I bear, right? And out of respect for him, I must insist that you treat me better than this. Not because I'm so great, not because I deserve it, but because he deserves it, and he loves me enough to want me to be treated well as well. So out of respect for his statute and out of stewardship for my body and my heart, I need to insist on being treated better in the future. So I always like to put that plug in there, that it's not standing in this plastic, fantastic worth. Like, I'm so great, I deserve to be treated better. It's, he is so great. I don't judge you because I know who I am and how how short I fall from God's standard. But out of respect for my creator, I must insist that this is not okay, that I was wronged, and that there needs to be some changes in the future.
Wow. Yeah, that is just so powerful, I think. And I think it's such a different way of viewing it, where it's like, it's absent of our own, like, as you said, like our own earnings of like goodness or like our own stature. It really is about like, this is God's perspective, and I want to honor God's perspective. And if I'm going to honor God's perspective, that was disrespectful, like, it's like, that's just, and it's, I just love that it does bypass this idea of like, being a squeaky clean person and like being good enough to be forgiven. It's like, it's not about my good enoughness as a person to be forgiven. I don't earn forgiveness from you. But it's about what, like, sorry, not forgiveness. I don't earn like the right to be treated right from you, but I do, like, God has given me that right. Like that's, and so therefore it exists.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said too. Like, wait a minute, I'm allowed to feel disrespected. That made me think about how disrespected God is throughout the Bible and how much he conveys it to his people, right?
Yeah.
Like how many times does he convey his hurt, his anger, his sadness, his sense of disrespect to his people in so many different ways all throughout the Bible. If he's allowed to feel disrespected and we're made in his image and it's a process for him to work through that emotion, how much more so would it be a process for us to work through that emotion of hurt, of disrespect, of feeling wronged, and of that sadness and pain and potentially anger that comes out of that. Now, again, what we see with God is when he's hurt and wronged, it doesn't change his decision to love and provide for his people. He maintains steady on that no matter what. Now, there are times that he lets go of his people because they've requested it. He's like, all right, if you say so, let me show you what that reality looks like. And then he'll come right back, right? When they're call out, like, please, we were wrong, come back, right? He'll come right back. But he never lets go of his people. He's never far from his people, even when he's hurt and angry. And so I think in that same way, we can straddle this, I don't look down on you. I don't judge you. I choose to have no ill will toward you, no bitterness. I'm choosing to engage in this process of forgiveness. That does not mean that emotionally I feel nothing over this. That's a process. It's going to take some time. And I think that's a process we see with God as well. He doesn't change his decision to love us. He absolutely takes time to work through his emotions. And I think we can follow his example in that.
Yeah, that's so true. I always remember listening to someone say, like, you know, an aspect of forgiveness is acknowledging that there is a debt that is owed. Like that's like the reality is like, you owe me something. Like I've, you know, there's a debt there. I think about like the fact that God does express his anger. Like he expresses like, there's a debt that's owed here. Like there's like, there's a debt. And you know, like even seeing that in just the big picture of like, even Jesus coming to earth, like that was an act of, there's a debt owed but I'm going to pay it. Yeah, like but that's so, I'd never considered that before about how actually, yeah, of course God does express his, the reality that he has been mistreated. And so therefore we also have access to that, allowing ourselves to feel disrespected.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's so powerful. There's a debt to be owed. I love that you said that because I was thinking like, oh, we should probably end with something for listeners. Like, how do you move through forgiveness, right? Like we're saying, hey, you have permission to feel hurt, to feel sad, to feel angry, to feel disrespected. You don't need to pretend like that's not there, because not only is it not possible, but also it's very unhelpful for your own heart and for this relationship to sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not there. That doesn't lead toward genuine, authentic, true connection.
Right.
That leads to mirrors and hazes and, you know, what's called smoke and mirrors, right?
Yes.
Like it's this pretend. And that actually doesn't lead toward that true, deep connection that we're all really searching for with God, ourselves, and others. So actually being honest and saying, I'm working toward forgiveness, but I still feel really hurt and angry. I'm going to need some time to work through this, can be actually much more connecting to God, self, and others. Instead of, yeah, it's fine, I forgive you. Who am I to hold anything against you, right? So this can actually be a much more fruitful journey for your own faith, for your relationship with God, and for your relationship with that person, though it does take a bit more time and intention and effort. But I love that you said like, hey, what did I love that you said? I just lost my train of thought. Let me think through it for a second. Oh, I love that you recalled there is a debt to be owed, and we can acknowledge that in relationship with other people. You have wronged me. There is a debt to be paid here. But also, I think a great way to move through that process of forgiveness, it starts with, just like this says, acknowledge your pain and anger, allow yourself to feel disrespected, be specific about future expectations and limits, your boundaries in the future, so that this, is prevented, or at least tried to be prevented in the future. But I think a portion of this that I would add to this process of forgiveness is, at some point, right, it's good to acknowledge how we feel. It's bad to ruminate and be ruled by our emotions. So there is that balance of, we need to feel that disrespect, that hurt, that anger, that fear, whatever it is. But then we need to move through it. And I think a great, and I don't, we don't say that with any time restrictions, like within 2 weeks or 2 years, or for this infraction this long and for that infraction that long. Like, there isn't really a time limit to it. It's kind of like grief. It is a grieving process. There's no expectation on the time limit of grief. But I think for me, what's really helped me to move through that process, once I feel like, all right, I'm starting to ruminate a little bit, bitterness is starting to grow, is kind of recalling that debt that I owe to God that I can never repay. And having that perspective juxtaposed with acknowledging my own disrespect in this relationship is really helpful to hold that tension of, yes, I was not treated okay. It's not okay because of who created me, and I will insist on being treated better in the future. However, who am I to hold this against you? Who am I to look down on you or judge you because of this? Because look at the debt I have to repay. And of course, we see parables about that in the Bible. So I think holding both of those truths together, I have been wronged, this isn't okay, but also I have wronged, and that is not okay. Holding those two together is really the path to that journey of forgiveness.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it is like they both hold equal weight, like, because it is about like, I remember I read this quote. What was it? It was, I'm just gonna, oh yeah, that was it. So it's this quote, I don't know where it's from, I'll have to find the reference later, but it says, when I exclude my enemy from the community of humans, I exclude myself from the community of sinners. Like, it's like, if I decide they're no longer human because they've hurt me, I then decide I must not be a sinner. It's that excluding self from the community of sinners and excluding them from the community of humans. And I think that quote is so powerful. And it's kind of exactly what you were saying, where it's like, that's what we don't want to give into in like creating a caricature out of the people that have wronged us. It's wanting to connect with the fact that we are capable of wrong and have been capable of wrong, because we've all wronged God and we've all fallen short in that way. And so holding that in mind, as well as holding the fact that, like, that still isn't the way that God wanted you to be treated, and that's never what he's wanted for you.
I love that. I love that you just said that, because that's what the final thought I was going to leave with our listeners is, forgiveness is so tough. This is a tough journey. This is not anything anyone ever wants to engage in with this journey, right? It means you've been wronged. You are fearful maybe about how you will be treated in the future. You're grieved. Lots of negative emotions, seemingly negative emotions. But I would say forgiveness is such a ripe opportunity for deeper connection with God. And I love what you just said. And that's what comes to my mind when I think about the forgiveness journey or the process to reconciliation with other people. It brings to mind this being nurtured and comforted by God in your relationship with God, right? It does require you to run to Daddy, to run to God and say, this wasn't fair. This wasn't right. I shouldn't have been treated this way. And I think God's response initially would be, you're right. I never intended for you to be treated that way. That is not how I created you. That's not how I created that other person. That's not how I created this world. And I grieve with you over this pain. And then once we feel more comforted and stable, then he would lower the boom and say, but you have wronged in the same measure. Just as I have forgiven you, I want you to forgive this person who did not do you right, who did you wrong, right? So it's him acknowledging, affirming our pain, our anger, our hurt, our sadness, affirming that we were not meant to be treated that way, but also affirming our humanness, our sinningness, our sinnerhood, right? To say, but you also are no better. And so I'm going to need you to move toward that forgiveness, move toward that reconciliation. I don't have a time limit. I'm going to be right here with you, but you've got to engage with this journey, because if you nurse it too long, it's going to turn into bitterness. It's going to get in the way of you connecting with you connecting with that person, and worse, you connecting with me. So out of your love and respect for me, move toward that process of reconciliation and forgiveness.
Yeah. Wow. Whew. Well, I feel like those are like two things to really like, I mean, we could talk so much more about forgiveness, couldn't we? Like I feel like we should go through like all of your points actually at some point, because they are so good. But yeah, I feel like at this point, like those two things are some sort of a navigation device for forgiveness.
Yeah, a GPS.
A GPS, exactly.
Through forgiveness. That's your map quest through forgiveness, folks.
Okay. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us on the Hearts Set Above podcast, and we'll see you next time.